When I inserted my bank card into the ATM, the screen flashed. Transaction declined. Account frozen. I stared at it, thinking it must be a glitch. I've never missed a payment in my life. I've never even taken out a loan. The October air was sharp that morning, and for a moment, it felt like it cut straight through me. Then the letter arrived, from Rockland Federal Bank. Outstanding mortgage balance. $950,000. Your property will be seized in 14 days if the debt is not paid. Below the printed words was a signature. My name, but not my handwriting. It was smooth and deliberate, someone else's hand pretending to be mine. I remember tracing the fake signature with my fingertip, my pulse slowing as understanding sank in. And that's when I found out the truth. My own daughter did this to me. She put me in debt for nearly $1 million behind my back. How could they do this to me? If you want to hear my story, stay till the end. And don't forget to subscribe. My name is Linda Parker. I'm 68 years old, born and raised in Maple Creek, Colorado, a quiet town framed by pine and silence. I spent 32 years behind the counter of the local post office, sorting mail, weighing packages, smiling at the same faces year after year. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. I liked knowing that people could count on me. I was 26 when my husband, Michael, died in a car accident on an icy November morning. After that, it was just me and the children, Melissa and Adam. I raised them in the little two-story house at the end of Birch Lane. Brown shutters, creaky steps, the same front door I painted every few years to keep it looking decent. That house held our laughter, our arguments, our Christmas mornings. Everything I ever worked for was tied to it. When you're a single mother, your whole life becomes about holding things together. I made lunches, helped with homework, and worked extra shifts so they could have new shoes when school started. I never went on vacations, never bought anything I didn't need. I told myself that love was enough, that if I gave them stability, they would grow into good, decent people. Melissa was the talker, bright, sensitive, opinionated. She studied social work, always talking about changing the world, helping those in need. She loved the sound of her own compassion. I was proud of her, though I sometimes wondered if she understood what real sacrifice looked like. Adam was different, quieter but not gentle. From his teenage years, he carried a sense of distance, like he was already planning his escape from our small town. He became an engineer, successful and practical. He bought a house in Denver and rarely came home except for holidays. And then there was my sister Karen, 3 years younger with a talent for charm. She had a way of making people trust her instantly, maybe because she always looked so put together. But behind that smile she measured everything. Every compliment, every favor had a string attached. When we were girls, she borrowed my dresses and never returned them. When we were adults, she borrowed money and never mentioned it again. Still, she was family. And family, I believed, meant forgiveness. Looking back, I can see how each of them took turns deciding what I was worth. Melissa treated me like a relic from another time, someone to manage, not to listen to. Adam treated me like a duty he had to check off a list. And Karen, she treated me like a resource. There was a time when I thought this was normal, when I mistook dismissal for love. I told myself they were busy, that the world had changed, that maybe I was old-fashioned. But small things began to add up. Little moments that felt like splinters under the skin. Melissa once told me, "Mom, you don't have to worry about money anymore. You'll always have us." I remember smiling, grateful, even though she said it with that tone people use when they're reassuring a child. I didn't realize then that what she really meant was, I'll take control of it someday. When I retired at 65, I thought I'd earned peace. I'd paid off the mortgage, put away enough for my modest savings, and had a pension that covered my bills. I started gardening again. I joined the library book club. I finally had time to breathe. Melissa started coming around more often then, showing up with takeout and big ideas. "You should let me help you manage your finances," she'd say. "It's confusing these days with all the online stuff. You don't want to fall for scams." I didn't argue. I wanted to believe her interest came from care, not calculation. Adam rarely called. When he did, our conversations were short and polite. "You're okay, Mom?" He'd ask, already half distracted. I said yes, always yes. I didn't want to be a burden. Karen came by once a month with coffee and gossip. She liked to sit at my kitchen table and talk about her latest clients, her new clothes, her connections. She would look around the house and say, "You've kept it nice, Linda. Must be worth a good bit now." At the time I didn't think much of it. I didn't realize she was already imagining the value. Not of my life but of my walls, my furniture, my land. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't arrive suddenly. It grows quietly, fed by your own trust. When I look back on those years, I see all the moments I dismissed. Melissa asking for my passwords just in case, Karen offering to organize my papers, Adam suggesting I should sell the house before I got too old to maintain it. They weren't helping me prepare for the future. They were preparing to inherit me while I was still alive. But I didn't see it. Not then. Not until that cold October morning at the ATM, when everything I thought was solid turned to dust in my hands. The first real crack appeared long before I noticed it. It was an ordinary Tuesday 2 summers ago. The air was hot enough to make the pavement shimmer, and I was pruning the lilac bushes by the porch when Melissa stopped by unannounced. She was dressed in a linen suit, sunglasses perched on her head, talking into her phone as she walked through my gate like she owned the place. "Mom," she said between sentences, "you really shouldn't be doing that. You'll hurt your back." "I'm fine," I told her, straightening up. "I've been doing this since before you were born." She smiled, the kind of smile people use when they've already decided you're wrong. Then she ended her call and leaned against the railing, scanning the yard as though appraising it. "This house is too much for you," she said. "The stairs, the yard, the maintenance, it's all a bit much. Don't you ever think about downsizing?" I laughed softly. "No. I like my space. Everything here has a story." "Mom," she said again, this time slower, more careful. "You don't even need money anymore. You're old. You don't live, you just survive." I remember standing very still, the shears still in my hand. The sun felt different then, colder somehow. I should have said something. I should have told her that surviving is what raised her, that every meal she ever ate was born from my survival. But I only smiled the way mothers do when they're trying to keep the peace. That sentence, "You're old, you don't live," echoed in my mind for days. It was the first time I realized Melissa no longer saw me as a person with choices. To her, I had become a placeholder, someone whose life was already spent. The next week she brought me a thick envelope of papers and said, "These are just some forms for the insurance. Nothing major." I trusted her. I didn't read them. I signed on the dotted lines because she said, "It's just routine." I even thanked her for helping. That's how it begins, with gratitude for the people who are already rewriting your life. After that, little things changed. She started taking over my appointments. She insisted on setting up automatic payments for my bills. She linked my accounts to her email, so she could monitor suspicious activity. I thought she was being kind. I didn't realize she was building a map. My entire financial world under her control. Around that same time, Karen began visiting more often. She brought coffee and gentle questions. "Have you thought about updating your will, Linda? You know how paperwork gets lost." Or, "Maybe Melissa could help you with those accounts. You don't want to make mistakes online." I remember one afternoon when Karen was in my kitchen, going through my old filing cabinet. She said she was helping me organize, but I caught her slipping my passport into her tote bag. "Oh," she said quickly, laughing. "I was just moving it out of the way." She put it back too casually. I wanted to believe it was nothing. That's how family disarms you. By being so familiar that suspicion feels like betrayal. Then there was Adam. When he called that Christmas, I told him Melissa had been helping with my finances. He said, "That's good. You're not exactly tech-savvy, Mom." He laughed. I laughed too, but it didn't sound right. I told myself this was aging. People stepping in, helping, rearranging things for my convenience. But slowly I began to feel erased. Melissa started introducing herself as handling my mother's affairs. She would speak for me at the bank, at the doctor's office, even when I was sitting right there. The words that used to belong to me, my house, my savings, my decisions, became ours. I noticed the way Melissa looked at me sometimes like I was a patient, not a parent. Karen mirrored that same gaze, the one that carries both pity and calculation. And Adam? He stayed distant, too far away to see what was happening, or maybe too comfortable pretending not to. The first real argument came in early spring. Melissa had gone into my bank app on her phone and transferred $1,200 to test a system, she said. I saw the notification by accident. You didn't ask, I said quietly when she visited that weekend. It's just temporary, she answered, brushing me off. Mom, you really don't understand how online banking works. I'm saving you from a scam. I've handled my money for 40 years, I said. She smiled again, that soft, superior smile. Yes, but times change. That night, I made tea and sat in the dark kitchen listening to the hum of the refrigerator. The spoon trembled faintly against the cup. For the first time, I wondered if my love for my children had turned into blindness. And yet, the next morning I still called Melissa to ask how her week was. I still said, "Thank you for helping me." I still believed that kindness could repair what arrogance had broken. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment I began losing everything. Not through theft, but through trust. After that spring, nothing felt quite like mine anymore. My home still looked the same. Same lace curtains, same ticking clock in the hallway, but the atmosphere had shifted. Every visit from Melissa came with a clipboard, a question, a decision already made for me. Mom, don't call the bank alone, you'll mess something up. Mom, sign this paper, it's nothing important. Mom, your house is too big for you. We'll handle it. Each phrase was delivered with that soft managerial tone that sounds like care but feels like control. She had learned the language of concern and used it like a scalpel. First I went along. I thought I was avoiding conflict. I told myself it's easier this way. But the truth was, I had begun to doubt my own capability. Every correction from Melissa chipped a little piece off my confidence. She made me believe I needed supervision. The post office where I had worked for 3 decades trusted me with thousands of dollars in cash every week. Yet suddenly my own daughter was telling me not to touch my own bills. One evening she called while I was watching the news. Mom, did you open that email from Rockland Bank? I think so, I said. Don't click anything, she snapped. You'll infect your computer. Just let me handle all that from now on. Her voice carried irritation, not protection. I apologized instinctively, as if I were a child caught doing something wrong. After we hung up, I sat there staring at the muted TV, realizing I had just apologized for reading my own mail. Karen's visits became part of the same quiet campaign. She began arriving with folders labeled, "Important Documents." She said she was helping me simplify my life. You don't want piles of paperwork everywhere, she'd say, sorting through my tax records, bank statements, insurance policies. She even created a small binder she called Linda's Peace of Mind. Inside were copies of my documents, at least I thought they were copies. Later I would learn some were originals. Karen would laugh easily and pour tea, distracting me with gossip. Melissa's doing so well, isn't she? She's got those connections in real estate now. You must be proud. I am, I said truthfully. I bet she'll help you sell this old place when the time comes, she added casually, her eyes sweeping the room. The time hasn't come, I said. She smiled, sipping her tea. No rush, of course. That was how they operated. Slowly, gently, with politeness masking a plan. I began noticing little things around the house. My file drawer was rearranged. My checkbook, once kept in a kitchen drawer, had moved to the top of my desk. My online banking password had been reset. When I asked Melissa about it, she said, "You must have forgotten it." She had begun speaking for me at every opportunity. When the plumber came, she negotiated the price before I could say a word. When the insurance company called, she answered on speakerphone and cut me off each time I tried to talk. Once she brought her husband, David, and walked through the house pointing at walls and fixtures. "If you ever sell, you'll get a fortune," he said. "This location's prime now." Melissa nodded, smiling. "We'll take care of it for her when the time comes." I was standing right there. They talked about my future as though I were already gone. I tried to bring it up to Adam. I called him one evening and said, "I think Melissa's changing things without asking me." He sighed. "Mom, she's just trying to help. You always think the worst." I wanted to argue, but his voice was tired, and I didn't want to sound foolish. So I let it go. That night I sat at the dining table, the same one where we had shared birthdays and Thanksgiving dinners. The surface was scratched and soft from decades of use. I ran my hand over it and thought about how easily things erode, not just wood but trust. Over the next few months, Melissa began insisting on meeting with financial advisors. She said they were friends from her office who could help secure my retirement. She drove me to a building downtown and introduced me to a man named Tyler Pratt, tall, polished, confident. He greeted me warmly, perhaps too warmly. "Mrs. Parker, we just want to make sure your assets are properly aligned for long-term care," he said. I didn't understand the jargon, but Melissa nodded, smiling. "Mom, just sign here. It's about the pension transfer." I signed not because I understood, but because I didn't want to embarrass her. I told myself she was competent, educated, and had my best interests at heart. When we left, I asked what it was exactly. She said, "It's just paperwork, Mom. You worry too much." That night I couldn't sleep. Something about Tyler's grin stayed with me. The way he avoided eye contact when I asked questions. The way Melissa squeezed my hand and said, "Trust me." I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. But in the silence of that night, listening to the wind move through the birch trees, I began to feel a small, undeniable truth pressing at my chest. I was losing something I couldn't name yet. Something invisible but essential. It wasn't money, not yet. It was authority. The right to steer my own life. And by the time I realized it, Melissa had already taken the wheel. The address in the bank letter, Sunset Valley 14, wouldn't leave me. I typed it into the search bar. A map opened to the Lake District. Then came the photos. A glass facade reflecting blue water, marble steps, a veranda. There it was. A luxury home worth close to $1 million. And there, posed on the balcony, was my daughter. I didn't follow Melissa's social media. She liked to narrate her life for strangers, and I preferred quiet. But the house had been tagged. A friend of a friend had posted a video. Clinking glasses, a ribbon cutting, a caption. New beginnings at Sunset Valley 14. I tapped through. I knew the angle of that balcony now. I knew the curve of the rail. And then I saw her. She was wearing a pale blue dress and holding a tall flute of champagne. Melissa, my daughter, smiling into the wind as if she'd earned it. The caption under her photo read, "Home. Not our home. Not renting. Just one word. Home. Bought in my name." I went back to the bank letter. I examined every line. Mortgage. Adjustable rate. Balloon clause. Documents attached. Each page had a signature, my name, crooked, practiced. Whoever signed had practiced. Whoever signed had studied me. I opened my file drawer and began cataloging what was missing. The birth certificate copy was gone. So were older tax returns, 2018 and 2019. My social security card, which I kept in a plastic sleeve behind the passports, had been replaced with a photocopy. I sat very still and listened to the house breathe, refrigerator hum, baseboard clicks, the faint wheeze of the hallway vent. The proof lived in those sounds, ordinary and loyal. Everything else felt staged. I made a list on a yellow pad. What they needed to steal my name. Social security number, tax records, a driver's license scan, a forged signature, a friendly hand at the bank. I wrote the names. Melissa, David, Karen, Tyler. I started with David. He was always pitching something slick, thin on history. I searched state records and there it was. Westwood Estate LLC. Registered 4 months before the mortgage. Manager David Caldwell. Purpose. Real estate consulting. The office address was a mailbox rental near the highway. I printed the page and circled the date. Then Karen. She had organized my papers the week before the mortgage date. She had taken the passport into her bag and joked. She had access to the file drawer. She knew where I kept the card. She knew my rhythms. I thought of Tyler Pratt, the advisor with the polished smile. Melissa's ex-boyfriend from college. He worked at Rockland Federal. I remembered his hand on the forms, sliding a pen toward me. He had been waiting for my signature. And when it didn't come, he found a way to conjure it. The story arranged itself in grim, simple lines. David needed a borrower who looked safe. Karen provided proof. Tyler opened the gate inside the bank. Melissa supplied the motive and the audacity. Together they built a lake house on the bones of my name. I returned to the Instagram post and stared at Melissa's smile. I tried to feel rage and found something colder. It wasn't shock. It was arithmetic. Inputs and outputs. Risk and reward. The mortgage amount, $950,000. paired neatly with the house listing on a property site I pulled up. Offer accepted 3 months prior. Closing date 6 weeks later. First payment missed, then another. The bank's machine woke and came for the easiest target, me. I printed screenshots. I stapled them to the state record for Westwood Estate LLC. I made a timeline: Karen's organizing day. The meeting with Tyler. The night Melissa reset my bank password because of security. The party video with the ribbon cutting. The letter from the bank. When I finished, the yellow pad was heavy with graphite. I pressed my palm to its surface and felt the grooves of my own handwriting. Proof literal. Someone will ask why I didn't call Melissa right then. Why I didn't drive to that glass house and throw the letter at her feet. Because I know my daughter. She has an explanation for everything, and each one is a door into her floor plan. If I walked in angry, I would walk out confused. So instead, I closed the file drawer, locked it, and placed the key beneath the blue mug Michael bought me on our 10th anniversary. A chip thing with a ring stain I can never wash out. I turned off the kitchen light. I didn't pray or plead. I stood in the dark and named it quietly and fully. This was theft. This was fraud. This was family. I made tea and waited for the kettle's click. That small metal throat clearing the house has done for decades. The steam fogged my glasses. I wiped them with the hem of my sleeve and set the cup on Michael's old coaster, the cork one with a faded trout. I listened to the drip in the sink, count the seconds. I thought about my name, how it used to feel solid in my mouth, and how, tonight, it felt like paper you could fold into any shape. Still, I didn't sleep that night. The wind pressed softly against the windows, and somewhere in the distance a train moved through the valley. I sat at the kitchen table, the yellow pad in front of me, the pages covered with evidence. My handwriting looked foreign now, sharp, deliberate, no longer the gentle loops I used to sign birthday cards. Each line of ink felt like a confession of what I had ignored. I made tea again, the same Earl Grey I've drunk every morning for 30 years. The steam curled up and disappeared, and for the first time I didn't taste it. I was numb but not afraid. I was simply awake. When you've spent your whole life taking care of others, it's easy to forget that you have rights of your own. That realization came quietly, not with rage or tears, but with a kind of stillness. A recognition that no one was coming to fix this but me. The next morning, I walked to the living room and opened the curtains. The light poured in, thin and cold. My reflection in the window startled me. Hair undone, eyes ringed with fatigue but steady. I whispered to it, almost testing the sound of my own voice. I am done being your victim. From now on, I am your lesson. It wasn't a threat. It was a vow. I began methodically, the way I used to sort registered mail. First, I gathered every financial document I still possessed: bank statements, pension forms, tax slips, property deeds. I took photos of each one with my old phone, saving them to a hidden folder. Then I went through the envelopes Melissa had left in my filing cabinet and compared them with my own papers. The differences were subtle. Dates altered, account numbers slightly off, my signature photocopied and pasted. By noon I had 3 folders labeled in neat block letters: truth, forgery, and unanswered questions. I called Rockland Federal Bank and requested a meeting with the fraud department. The young man on the phone sounded nervous when I explained. "Mrs. Parker," he said, "you're saying your daughter took out the mortgage in your name?" "Yes," I answered. "And she had help." He promised to escalate it immediately. I didn't wait for him to call back. Instead, I phoned an attorney whose name I found online. Someone who specialized in elder financial abuse. Her name was Dana Morales. Her voice was calm, precise, professional. She asked me to bring all documentation to her office the next morning. "Don't inform your family yet," she said. "We need to secure your position first." That sentence, "secure your position," echoed in my mind. I liked how it sounded. Not rescue. Not pity. Security. That evening, I walked through each room of my house, as though introducing myself to it again. The framed photo of Melissa in her graduation gown. Adam at age 10 holding a model airplane. Karen and me at a picnic years ago, both of us laughing. I didn't cry. I simply acknowledged that these were artifacts from a story that had already changed shape. In the bedroom, I found Michael's old watch in the drawer. I wound it until it ticked again, soft and reliable. Then I sat on the bed and thought about time, how it always runs out for those who wait, but not for those who act. The next morning I dressed carefully. Navy slacks, white blouse, light jacket. My mother used to say, when you're fighting for your dignity, don't show up in despair. I brushed my hair, put on lipstick and drove downtown to meet Dana Morales. Her office was quiet, lined with case files and plants. She offered me water and listened without interruption as I explained everything. From the first signature I didn't read to the fake mortgage. She nodded slowly, taking notes. Mrs. Parker, she said at last, this is textbook financial identity fraud. But since it's family, it falls under elder exploitation laws. We'll start by freezing all accounts associated with your social security number. Then we'll contact the district court for an injunction. I felt my pulse steadying. And what happens to her? That depends on whether she cooperates, Dana replied. But first, we protect you. When I left her office, the sun had come out. I stopped by the park across the street and sat on a bench. Children were playing near the fountain. One little girl laughed so hard she fell backward into the grass, unbothered by dirt or embarrassment. I found myself smiling. That night I prepared. I gathered my notes, printed emails, saved screenshots, and stored them in a new folder on a flash drive. I hid it inside the teapot I kept on the top shelf, the one no one ever used. I didn't call Melissa. I didn't call Karen. I didn't call Adam. The silence between us was no longer a burden. It was a weapon I could finally hold. For the first time in months I slept soundly. Some people think revelation arrives like lightning. But for me it came like dawn, slow, deliberate, illuminating everything I had refused to see. By morning I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. Dana filed the injunction that same week. She handled everything with quiet precision, keeping me updated with steady, measured emails. Each message ended with a line I began to repeat to myself like prayer. Stay composed. Truth works best when it's documented. For the first time in years I felt guided, not by family but by fact. Melissa had stopped calling after I ignored her last message. Mom, you've probably gotten a letter from the bank. Don't panic, I'll handle it. Handle it. Those were her words for taking what wasn't hers. The next morning Dana called. They've confirmed the fraud, she said. The mortgage was processed under your social security number, but the application came from an IP address registered to Westwood Estate, LLC. David's company. They used a falsified power of attorney, Dana continued. We've submitted evidence for immediate asset freeze and subpoena requests for the involved parties. Her tone remained calm, but I could hear the edge of admiration when she added, You built an impeccable paper trail, Mrs. Parker. I told her. I worked at a post office for 32 years. I believe in order. She chuckled softly. Order is how justice begins. Melissa didn't know yet. She was still posing for photographs in front of that glass house, pretending her world was unbreakable. But the clock had started ticking, and this time it was wound by me. Dana asked if I wanted to attend the first hearing in person. Absolutely, I said. If she forged my name, she can see my face when the truth is read aloud. But I wanted more than legal correction. I wanted clarity, mine, not revenge. So I planned my move carefully. Melissa and David were hosting their official housewarming that weekend at Sunset Valley 14. I saw the invitation online, a public event, lavish broadcast to their circle of friends. 40 guests, catered dinner, music by the lake. I told Dana. She paused, thinking. We could serve her then. Publicly. I nodded. Let's do it. The day of the party, I dressed in my best gray coat, the one with the pearl buttons Michael once said made me look dignified. I pinned my hair, packed my folder of documents, and met Dana and the court bailiff outside the gates of Sunset Valley. The lake shimmered behind the house like glass. I could hear laughter from the patio, music spilling through open doors. We walked in as the sun set, the air heavy with the scent of champagne and grilled seafood. A waiter glanced at us uncertainly, then stepped aside when Dana showed her credentials. Inside, everything glittered, crystal, marble, light. I saw Melissa across the room, radiant in a gold dress. She was telling a story to her friends, gesturing toward the staircase as though she'd built it herself. When she turned and saw me, her smile faltered for the briefest second. Then it returned, polished and practiced. Mom, you came, she said brightly, hurrying over. I wanted to explain about the The bailiff unfolded a document and spoke clearly over the music. Melissa Caldwell, you are hereby served with a civil lawsuit for identity theft, financial fraud, and forgery. The music stopped. Conversations froze. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered sharp and final. Melissa's face drained of color. What is this? She whispered. It's the truth, I said. My voice was calm, level. And it has your signature all over it. David stepped forward, stammering. There's been a mistake. Dana handed him his own copy of the summons. You're listed as a co-defendant. Guests began shifting uncomfortably, pretending not to watch but unable to look away. The word fraud echoed in the stillness. Melissa's eyes searched mine, pleading, furious, afraid. Mom, how could you do this to me? I didn't, I said. You did it to yourself. She opened her mouth again, but the bailiff was already walking toward the door. Dana followed. I lingered a moment longer, letting the silence settle. The chandelier lights reflected in the marble floor like 100 small moons. For a heartbeat, I felt the urge to comfort her, to be her mother again. But then I remembered the forged signature, the missing papers, the cold message on the ATM screen. I turned and walked out without another word. Outside, the air smelled of pine and smoke from the grill. Dana touched my arm gently. Are you all right? I nodded. Better than I've been in years. As we left, I glanced back once. Through the glass facade, I saw Melissa sink into a chair, her perfect world beginning to crumble around her. I didn't feel triumphant, only complete. Justice doesn't shout. It arrives, documented, sealed, and delivered, like registered mail with no return address. That night, I drove home to Birch Lane, parked beneath the old birch tree, and sat for a while in silence. The moonlight fell across the porch where my children used to play. For the first time in months, I felt ownership again, not just of my house but of myself. Tomorrow would bring headlines, calls, excuses. But tonight belonged to me. By morning, the lake house glittered like evidence. Rockland Federal froze the escrow at 9:12 a.m., and by noon council filed a notice of default naming me the purported borrower. Dana faxed our injunction and attached each forged page. The reply was fast and clinical. Collateral to be secured. Occupants to vacate upon writ. A clerk's stamp, the machinery that replaces outrage. At 3, a locksmith changed the cylinder at Sunset Valley 14, while an asset manager photographed each room. The images weren't glamorous. Open drawers, half-folded towels, a bowl of lime sweating under hard lights. On the balcony, 2 flutes drew lazy flies. Wealth always looks different when it's inventoried. Melissa called 5 times, left 2 messages. Mom, please. We can fix this, she said in the first, voice tight. In the second, lower. I didn't mean for it to go this far. She didn't mention the million or my name on the mortgage. She wanted mercy without meeting truth. David went on offense. He emailed Dana that Westwood Estate LLC had merely advised and had no fiduciary role. 10 minutes later, we attached his filings, the mailbox rental, the IP logs. His next note was shorter. We seek to resolve privately. By evening, he packed a suitcase. Melissa posted a filtered sunrise captioned resilience, then deleted it. Karen's unraveling was smaller and meaner. Her supervisor called after the subpoena named her document custodian. We had no idea she accessed personal identifiers, he said, careful. 2 days later, Karen left a voicemail I replayed to be sure I'd heard it right. Linda, she whispered, they've put me on leave. I only copied a few things because Melissa said it was urgent. In the background, a drawer slammed. She didn't apologize. She asked if I could explain the misunderstanding. Tyler Pratt was brisk in denial until the compliance audit surfaced his logins. The timestamps matched the night Melissa reset my bank password. His branch manager, a woman who'd smiled at me when I opened my first savings, called to apologize. There will be disciplinary action, she said. Later, Dana forwarded a memo. Employee suspended pending termination. Felt both too little and exactly right. Adam called once late. No greeting. You humiliated the family, he said. You could have handled this quietly. I listened to the hum of his car, the impatience in his breath. She's your sister, he added. What kind of mother sues her own child? I looked at the blue mug by my sink and said, A mother who was sued first by a forged signature. He exhaled, disgusted. I can't do this, he said, and the line clicked dead. The bank seized the house by week's end. A thin paper notice went up beside the shining door. Black print, no drama. An auction date was set. Melissa moved to a rented condo near the highway. Its walls the color of dust. David served her divorce papers there, arriving with a courier who wouldn't meet her eyes. In his petition he portrayed himself as a dupe. I was misled, he wrote, though he had held the ribbon while she cut it. Neighbors whispered. Friends stopped liking her posts too. The charity where she worked placed her on administrative leave pending review of conduct inconsistent with fiduciary trust. She sent another message I kept but did not answer. I'm not a monster, Mom. I believe that. Monsters aren't required for harm. Sometimes harm is just appetite with paperwork. Karen tried to bargain. She came to my door with a tin of lemon bars as if sugar could paste over criminal ink. We can tell them it was a mix-up, she said, hands fluttering. I pointed to the file on my table, the timeline, the screenshots, the affidavits. No, I said. We can tell them the truth. Her smile collapsed. She left the tin and took nothing but her keys, heavy in her palm. Tyler's name vanished from the branch website. A week later, outside counsel proposed a settlement. Compensation for the damage tied to their employees' approvals and removal of the fraudulent debt from all records. Dana read the figure, $35,000, then met my gaze. This covers what they can cover, she said. The rest is your life, which you've already reclaimed. Adam didn't call again. He sent a single text, I need distance. As if distance were a punishment I hadn't already survived. I typed no reply. Love, like credit, requires limits. That evening I walked past the birch and saw a long strip of bark torn pale as paper. I pressed it back gently and left it alone. Some breaks are warnings. Some are boundaries. In the quiet I heard what consequence really sounds like. A door closing that should have closed sooner. A key turning, the house settling into itself. None of it felt like victory. It felt like the ground returning beneath my feet. The bill came due and everyone paid a portion: bank, daughter, ex-boyfriend, sister, son. I signed only my own name. I kept only what was mine. When the noise died down I was left with quiet, real quiet, the kind that hums like a second heartbeat. The lawsuit ended. The house stayed mine. The forged mortgage was erased as if it had never existed. The bank transferred the compensation into my account. $35,000. I stared at the number on the screen for a long time, not because of its size, but because it was finally under my control again. The first thing I did was change every lock, every password, every habit that had once been shared. I made a new binder for my documents, labeled in my handwriting. Only mine. I bought a small safe for the essentials: deed, will, birth certificate, and placed it behind the old cedar wardrobe. For the first time in years, I walked through the house without hearing echoes of someone else's plans. I rearranged the living room, painted the kitchen walls pale green, planted lavender beneath the window. The air smelled cleaner, somehow lighter. I didn't celebrate, I restored. That was enough. I enrolled in a watercolor class at the community center. My hands, stiff from years of sorting mail, rediscovered gentleness. I began painting small landscapes. Nothing perfect, just color finding its way onto paper. I met people who didn't know me as Melissa's mother, or the woman from the bank story. They just knew me as Linda, who liked the smell of turpentine and mint tea. With part of the settlement, I took a train trip to Santa Fe. I hadn't traveled since Michael died. The motion of the train soothed me, the rhythmic clatter like an old heartbeat. I watched the land unfold through the window and thought, this is what life looks like when no one else is steering it. Back home, I joined a group of volunteers who deliver meals to shut-ins. Most of them were younger, but they treated me with respect, not pity. I learned that helping strangers felt purer than helping family ever had. There were no debts attached, only gratitude that began and ended with a smile. Evenings became my sanctuary. I'd light the same candle on the kitchen table, brew tea in Michael's mug, and open the window to let in the sound of the birch leaves. Sometimes I'd think about everything I'd lost, but mostly I thought about what I'd gained. Space, clarity, ownership of my own story. Freedom doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through the house when you realize no one else has the keys. I wasn't angry anymore. I was finished being the woman who existed in other people's shadows. I was finally myself again, steady, ordinary, and unafraid. Weeks later, Melissa came to my door. No makeup, no bravado, just a daughter who had run out of stories. Her eyes searched mine as she whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Let's fix things. I need you." I looked at her, steady and calm. "I needed you too," I said. "But you chose money over blood. Now I choose myself." She cried quietly. I didn't. I had already made peace. I watched her walk away down the same path where she once rode her bike as a child. The air smelled of lilac again. Blood doesn't make a family. Loyalty does. Respect does. Love does. And when someone destroys those things, forgiveness is not owed, it is earned. If this touched a nerve, you belong here. Subscribe to hear truths where silence becomes strength.